Looking for the best realtor in Calgary? Whether you're buying or selling, it can make all the difference. And with over 6,000 realtors in Calgary, how do you know who's actually the best fit for you? In this video, if you stick around, I'll let you know my thoughts on what makes a great realtor and how to pick the best realtor for you. My name is Ryan Gillard at Real Broker, your Calgary realtor. All right, let's get into it. If you're buying or selling a home in Calgary, choosing the right realtor isn't just important. It can be the difference between a smooth and stress-free process or a complete nightmare. Now, working with buyers, I've seen them spend months upon months of looking at homes just to have deals fall apart, ending up with costly repairs, the financing pulled, spending too much money. For sellers, the same thing. I've seen deals fall apart for items that should have been disclosed, leaving tens of thousands of dollars on the table and even lawsuits. So how do you avoid all this and make sure you're choosing the right realtor? That's exactly what this video is about. I'll break down what makes a great realtor, what happens if you hire a bad realtor, questions that you should be asking the realtor, and so much more. So let's get right into it. Now, with the video title, it is a bit loaded, the best realtor in Calgary. How do you track that? There's about 6,000 of us in the city, but I'll give you my thoughts on everything, and then you can decide if I'm a good fit for you. But I'd love to earn your business, and let's get right into it. And I'll start off here with what makes a great realtor. And the first point here is I think they should be full-time. If you're interviewing agents and they're part-time, I would probably move on for the most part, unless they're like in the business 30 years and they're semi-retired. But for the most part, if they're new in the business and they're part-time, I probably wouldn't hire them. It is a full-time business. You've got deadlines, you've got weird hours, and you have to work a lot in real estate. So I don't think it's possible as a part-time agent. That's just my opinion. Next point is time in the business and experience. Now, this is a bit of a yes and a no for me because there are people in real estate who have been licensed forever and don't do much business. So their time in the business is not really helping them. And they could be working on the wrong things for a long time. But occasionally you will come across some newer people that just destroy the business and accumulate knowledge very quickly. But for the most part, I would say time in and experience is definitely beneficial. Especially if you worked in down markets, hot markets, flat markets, experience is definitely, it does help for sure. And the next point is transparency and integrity. We call that a fiduciary duty in real estate, and we owe that to the client. Now, this doesn't always happen, and every single month, the Real Estate Council of Alberta will email the punishments they've ruled on during that month, and you'll see fines, suspensions, you see some crazy stuff in real estate, and those are usually situations where the realtor wasn't working for the client, they were working for themselves, and that's called commission breath in the industry. So you want to find someone that's like the honest, that's black and white, that will guide you through the process and help you out every step of the way and put their interest ahead of your own. And I'd also say that you need someone that's not going to BS you. Sometimes the client is wrong and they're making the wrong decisions, and the realtor is there to be a sounding board and tell them, hey, I think we should do it this way instead, and these are the reasons why. You're there to be a guiding voice, and sometimes you have to confront your own client just to make sure they make the right decision. And the next point, what you think would be a given, is strong market knowledge. You need to know what's happening with the market. Is it a buyer's market, a seller's market, or a flat market? When you're listing properties, can you price it accordingly to maximize the return for the seller? Can you structure offers for a buyer? You just need to know what's happening with the markets, and you need to be a bit analytical sometimes. Even if you're not naturally an analytical person, you need to become one, because a quarter of the population is probably very analytical, and you need to be able to talk their language and understand the market stats and the trends and which way the market is going. So you need to be an expert on the market. And next up is local expertise. Now, Alberta is a province where it seems like everybody is from somewhere else. So you can come here and you can be successful as a real estate agent, but it definitely does help if you have local knowledge. So being born and raised here, it definitely gives me an advantage. And I can tell you about every single neighborhood in Calgary. I've got a long list of professional contacts. I can tell you all the upcoming infrastructure projects, where the best schools, restaurants, and parks are. So it helps to have that knowledge as a realtor, because people have questions like that. They have questions about commute time. Is this area bad? Just questions like that are very common when you're dealing with the public, especially when they're relocating from somewhere else in Canada. They'll have a long list of questions, and it helps to have local knowledge. And the next point, which is a big one, is communication skills. Now, one of the biggest complaints against realtors is that we don't communicate enough. You hear it quite often that somebody will list a property, a realtor will list a property, and then they will vanish, and the client never hears from them again. That's the number one complaint against agents, and it's very important. And I think that this goes back to being full-time as well. You have to be able to take calls, texts, emails, and work odd and late hours. It's just part of the job. It's kind of normal for me to be working very late, until like midnight sometimes, working offers, deadlines and stuff like that. You have to be full-time and you have to communicate clearly and be on top of things. And you have to be quite organized and be able to communicate with the buyers and sellers depending on where they are in the transaction and keep them updated. Now, even if nothing is going on, I will still call my sellers or text or email every Friday with an update. This was more common in a balanced or a buyer's market, as listings weren't selling quite as fast. In these hot markets, everything happens so quickly. But when the market returns to normal, you have to keep your clients up to date with what's happening with their transaction. And so every Friday was my update day, if nothing else happened during that week. And the last point here about communication, which is very important, is you want to manage expectations with the buyer or the seller. And by that, you have to coach them along the way and identify the issues that might pop up and get out in front of those issues and let the buyer or the seller know what is likely to happen and how you can avoid it, so nothing blows up. Most agents don't do this. They just go with the flow and they're flustered and things fall apart. So you want to manage expectations if you can. And the next point here, I think it's important nowadays to be in the digital world and being very tech savvy. When I first started, this wasn't the case back in 2012. I basically just called for sale winners and expired listings every day, 3 to 4 hours every single day. No website, no YouTube, no social media. It was just old-fashioned prospecting. And that still works, but nowadays there's so much more that you can also do. Like YouTube, for example, you can boost listings, you can advertise on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. There's all sorts of new avenues to add additional exposure to your clients' listings. And I think that helps. So I think nowadays you need to find a realtor that has some kind of social media presence. And you'll want to have a good social media presence, not this generic stuff that you see from a lot of agents with their just listed, just sold posts, or they'll do a walkthrough with just elevator music in the background. They're not in the video. They're not trying to showcase the property. You can do a lot with social media. Like I have some videos that have 50,000 views online. And that's huge. Like if you look at the MLS, I can see the back end views per listing, and most properties are sold with under 1,000 views. But if you can showcase some listings that have 50,000 views, you're bringing additional eyeballs to a lot of your listings that is exceeding what the MLS can do. And if you're not leveraging this as a realtor, I think you're dropping the ball. And I think if I was a client, either a buyer or a seller, I would pick someone that has some kind of social media presence. And the last point here is problem solving and adaptability. So rarely do transactions go smoothly from start to finish. There's always some kind of issue that pops up, whether it's in financing, the home inspection, condo review. I've had issues with deposits as well. There's always something that pops up. I've had issues post-transaction where the title was all wrong and the condo plan was messed up. There's always something that pops up. And as a realtor, you need to be calm and cool and be a problem solver. And sometimes you need to be very level-headed because the buyer and the seller might hate each other. You might hate the other agent. There's always some kind of personality conflict in real estate. So you have to be the person that's just, black and white, very level-headed, and a problem solver. All right, let's move along to the next section. And that is, if you select the wrong realtor, what can happen? What can go wrong? And the first point here, let's talk about offers. Now, if the listing agent is not that experienced, and maybe the seller isn't as well, they might just simply select the wrong offer. There might be additional terms in there or a price that's not good enough, and that might be costly for the seller. It could be that simple. And a strong negotiator will know if they can counter that offer, how they should counter it, and maybe that seller walks away with better terms or more money in their pocket. And I think not understanding the market conditions can also backfire for sellers. So if it's a buyer's market or a seller's market, sometimes if an offer comes in and the market is red hot, you can delay that offer for a couple days and try to get more interest in competing offers, and then you can really benefit as a seller. But as the market cools off and there's more inventory, you can't do this. And if you try to do it, it can actually backfire on you. I've had it this year alone in the condo sector, which is not as hot as it used to be, where we submitted an offer and the seller's like, oh, come back to us in 3 days. So we told them, if this is the case, our price comes down $20,000 in 3 days from now. And they changed their mind real quick, and we got that deal done that same day. So you have to understand what's happening with the market conditions. And the next point here, and this is more for sellers, and it's about pricing your property. Now, if you don't have a strong listing agent, the seller might dictate their terms on the agent, and they'll want to list it high to leave room for negotiation. You don't want that because the buyers don't see your property. They don't see it, and if they do see it and they view your property, they'll just use your property to make it easier to buy something else. You're actually helping the competition sell their home if you overprice your property, and it will cost you time and money. It might take, say in a hot market, maybe it should take like 2 to 3 weeks, but if you overprice your property, now it takes 3, 4, 5 months or more, and it might cost you 5 or 10% in price reductions. So it doesn't do you any good to have a high price to leave room for negotiation. You want an agent to kind of show you the way that you want to be priced in such a way that the buyers feel like they're going to lose out, and they offer their best foot forward, and they offer right away. And the next point here is poor communication with the other agent, and this can crater transactions. So for example, if I'm working with the buyer and I submit my offer to the listing agent, sometimes they don't respond at all. They just ghost you. They've gone AWOL. It does happen, and if that seller knew about this, they would be furious. And I've had situations where they never got back to me. So our offer just went nowhere. No one talked to me, no one picked up the phone, and that buyer just said, screw it, and they bought something else. And there are many expired and terminated listings every single month on the MLS. And who knows, maybe this seller was one of them and they just changed their plans about selling simply because the other agent wouldn't pick up the phone. And the next point is not cluing in to the buyer's or seller's motivational clues. So it sounds a bit odd, but when you're going through the process, sometimes the buyer or the seller will give little hints and clues regarding their motivation, and you can use those to your advantage and negotiate from a position of strength. So for example, if you're dealing with the seller, so you're the listing agent, sometimes the buyer's agent will give in that they're highly motivated about a certain possession date. They have to have it, otherwise they're going to be screwed. Just stuff like that is quite common. And even the other agent can sometimes give away clues. Like if you ask the seller's agent why they're moving or when they want their possession, they can just go off on a tangent and give you all sorts of information. And you have to be able to be a good listener and a good salesperson to pick up on these clues, and you can use it to your advantage. And the last point is letting emotions get in the way. Now, sometimes going through the process, the buyer and the seller might end up hating each other and they're not very cooperative, and deals can fall apart like that from that. And same thing with the buyer's agent and the listing agent. Sometimes they get at each other's throats and it can compromise the transaction. So if possible, you want to hire someone that's very calm and collected, very level-headed, and can just take everything in stride and keep everyone calm and collected if possible. And the last section, which I'll go through briefly here, and this is taken from my blog article, which you can find in the written description. And this section is, what questions should I ask a realtor before hiring them? And the first point here, how long have you been a real estate agent? Now, this one is important. I think experience does matter, but be mindful because there are agents who have a lot of time in the business, but they're not selling that many properties. And sometimes you can find newer people that are doing a lot of transactions. So it's good to do your homework. What areas and types of properties do you specialize in? This is important if you're selling like an acreage or a condo or a luxury property. You'll want somebody that has some experience in the type of property that you have. Condos are confusing, so you got to make sure that you have someone that's taken the condo course that understands how it all works. How will you help me determine the right price for my home? Are they just winging it? Are they guessing on the price, or are they coming with data to back it up? What is your marketing strategy for selling homes? Do they even have a marketing plan of action, or they just list the property and vanish? In my written description, I have a seller's guide that you can check out, and you can see my marketing plan of action. How will you help me find the right home within my budget? Will the agent be involved in the search process, or is the buyer doing that? Questions like that. You might want to ask, can you provide references from past clients? And I do that with my Google reviews page, which you can find by clicking this link if you're curious. What are the total costs involved in buying or selling a property? There's all sorts of costs, from home inspections, condo reviews, real property reports and stuff like that, the commission breakdown. So there are fees for both buyers and sellers in this process. It's a very good question to ask them. How do you negotiate on behalf of your clients? It's important to talk over strategy with your clients before acting and before getting into the process. What are the current market trends in this area? Yeah, you have to know what's happening with the market. Is there lots of competition? Is it the buyer's market, seller's market? Are lots of homes expiring? And lastly, how will we communicate throughout the process? Some love calls, some hate calls, some like texting, some like emails. It's important to find out what the client prefers and then communicate with them that way. And again, communication is one of the biggest problems in real estate, where people will list a property and vanish. So it's important to hash that out and talk about just how will the communication be going throughout the process. All right, so we're done here. And one last thing, if you are thinking of buying or selling and you have some questions, you can go up here to my website, ryangillard.ca, go to this About section and put down Contact Us, or click Contact Us, and then write your message here. I read all of these. If you're looking at buying or selling, or you have questions about the value of your property, anything whatsoever, buying, selling, or relocating, just come here to this form. Let me know your name, email, phone number, and your message, and I will get back to you myself. I'm not giving this to someone else to do. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to help you out. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you on the next video.